The gentleman yields. Mr. Van Orden's recognized for 5 minutes, but we've got 8 minutes to vote, so keep it brisk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please pull up that image. Get it on the screen. Here it is. We've done this before, Mr. Secretary. Are you aware that 70% of the world's cobalt is produced in the Democratic Republic of Congo?
Yes.
Are you aware that 4.3% of every electric car battery is comprised of cobalt?
What I can tell you is that today's EV batteries use 80% less cobalt, and in
Mr.
fact,
Secretary,
most of the
please, Mr.
cobalt now
Secretary,
comes as a
Mr.
byproduct of
Secretary,
nickel and copper
Mr.
mining.
Secretary,
I'm also
I am a
concerned about
member-
the cynical exploitation of images of child labor, when the reality is that anybody concerned about that could be teaming up with us to make sure that there is compliance on forced and child
Mr.
labor for any of the
Secretary,
products that might entail them.
I'm going to remind you of something that apparently you have forgotten. I am a member of a co-equal branch of government and will be respected, and you will not interrupt me in my house.
Then I would ask you not to interrupt me either, Congressman.
Very well. Are you aware that 4.3% of all electric batteries are comprised of cobalt?
Again, I don't know the recency of that data, but I can tell you the cobalt composition is going down.
It is accurate. Are you aware that 15 to 30% of all of the cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo are artesian mines?
I believe you.
That is correct. Are you aware that approximately 40 to 255,000 cobalt miners in the Democratic Republic of Congo are children working in slave conditions?
I'm certainly aware of horrific conditions around the world in the extraction and mining industries of many minerals, including cobalt.
The last time you were here, I asked you a very specific question. How many of these children do you estimate will have to die to make the goal of electrifying 50% of the fleet by 2030 electric? This was your response. You have better data on how many children will die if we allow climate change to increase unimpeded. That tells me that you actually do have data on how many children will die from mining cobalt. If you are able to tell me that you have more data on how many children will be dying from climate change. So I'd like an answer to my question. How many children are going to have to die in those conditions to meet the artificial goal of 2030 of electrifying half of the fleet?
None, if you will work with us to make sure that anything imported is conforming to our requirements around forced and child labor.
Until that's able to take place, how many children are going to have to continue to work in slave conditions in the Democratic Republic of Congo to make sure that we can meet the artificial goal of 50% of the fleet being electrified by 2030?
None is the only acceptable answer.
That is excellent. And guess what, sir? This is H.R. 8495. It's put in by my friend, Mr. Duarte from California. It's EV free trade bill. I'm going to ask you publicly now, and I'll send this to your office, if you will support this bill. You and me are 6 and 7. I know you got little kids. I got 9 grandkids. I'm going to have 11 by the end of the summer. I don't ever want your children to be exposed to any of this. I don't want my grandchildren to be exposed to any of this. And I don't think you do either, Mr. Secretary.
If this legislation represents a serious effort to ensure compliance with forced and child labor requirements and make sure that none of that finds its way into products used in America, then I would be very interested to work on that.
I will send it to you because it is laser focused on that very specific issue. So what I heard from you, Mr. Secretary, is that you do understand that there are children working in these horrific conditions, and we acknowledge this. And we acknowledge the fact that what's driving those conditions with these African children, and some of their folks are right across the way. What's driving these children, these African children, to work in slave conditions is our want and consumption of cobalt. That's factual.
Which is why we're trying to cut the use of cobalt, right? Because really we have, in my view, we have 4 options. Stop using batteries, have batteries that don't use cobalt, source cobalt from somewhere that doesn't have the conditions of the DRC, or have better conditions in the DRC. And I think it's a combination of the last 3 that's more realistic than stopping using batteries.
I understand that. So we do know, and we're acknowledging publicly, that this is taking place and that we can work collectively to stop this, because this is terrible. And no one who has a soul can look at those pictures and say that having an artificial date of 2030 established for 50% of our fleet to be electrified is worth a single child working in slavery.
No one here, to the best of my knowledge, accepts those kinds of conditions in any product. And I hope you're equally serious about the other 158 products that have been identified as being vulnerable to child or forced labor abroad.
Mr. Secretary, I'm deadly serious about that, and I'm amazed that you and I found common accord, and I appreciate it.
Wonders never
And I
cease,
yield
Congressman.
back.
Thank you.